was a lot of money. There was a lot of construction. This was not a little movie.
And for a period of time, I didn't have a weekend off for 11 weeks.
If it's for killing it, that's the way we'll do it. I'm for that. Nothing else.
It got tense inside those corridors.
He loves working with smoke. Tons of smoke. This beeswax.
Sometimes I know they used to complain about me not sitting there having a heart-to-heart. I didn't want to sit there and have a heart-to-heart. I wanted them to feel insecure. I wanted them to be afraid. And that's why I'd never show them the alien.
The whole thing pivoted on believing a number of rather fantastic things. And it was very clear that if the monster looked silly or the chest-bursting scene looked ridiculous or, the whole thing was a lost cause.
My personal predominant writing emotion throughout that whole production was deep worry. For once in my career, create a really good movie. The elements were there. And at the same time, there were elements there that could bring it all down and turn it into, kitty litter.
Shot at Shepperton Studios. Then it was a kind of slightly run down just outside of London. It had been a famous studio, but the Who were in a soundstage trying out a laser show next door to us. There was a special effects unit at Bray Studios, which was way at the other end of London. I actually left right when they started shooting. I thought, Gordon was going to stay there. Came back when there were some problems and spent most of the next year there until we were finished.
I went on the set several times, yes. Quite remarkable, actually. I didn't expect it to be quite as fascinating as I found it to be. I remember the first day I went on the set, they took me through the whole workshop and showed me what they were doing, and I was pleasantly surprised.
I seem to remember the length of the production was, I think it must have been about 14 weeks. I know we went over a couple. It was a tough schedule, very, very tough. It was tough because Ridley was, as always, pushes the fabric.
It was tense because the budget was very low, and there were, within the first 4 days of shooting, there were 9 producers and studio executives on the set just counting the minutes on Ridley and complaining and why wasn't he shooting, and he was shooting so fast. They gave him no pre-light time, so he was trying to find the look in the first 2 days. And one of the producers, I remember, came to me on the 4th day and said, "Why is he taking so long?" And I said to him, "I don't understand what you're saying. He's doing 40 setups, 50 a day sometimes. The stuff looks amazing. I don't know what you're all doing." And it did get to Ridley. I remember one instant, I was right next to him. He went off like a rocket. It was like power coming out. He punched his fist right through the ceiling of the bridge in just sheer frustration because he did not understand why everyone was on his back.
Well, of course, our first day of shooting, and all of the things start popping, and there was smoke, so much smoke. It was unbelievable. The canisters were going, and the smoke was being pumped in because we're supposed to be on fire as we're crash landing into this strange planet. I'm surprised none of us are dead. I mean, they didn't have codes like here. They have to have a water base, which took a long time for them to get, but over there was like smelt pots. You were so grimy when you left at the end of the day. I mean, between the being sprayed with glycerin and the smoke and the beeswax. John Malo was the one who designed the costumes, and these costumes were, they were huge. They were padded. We had big plates. They were like football padding, only they were sort of very, very heavy plastic, and then we had these big bubbles on the top of our heads, and they had CO2 canisters in the back to set off that smoke as we went along.
Standing in that spaceship with a clip on, fastening it on, within 15 seconds, I'm getting really hot. And I don't get claustrophobic, but I'm getting really hot, and you could easily get phobic, right? I said, Jesus, this doesn't work. You got to keep them cool inside here. We have to have some kind of help with, oxygen, correct mix, right? After all, we are in the 20th century. Isn't that possible? You got aqua lungs and you got breathing apparatus. And explained to me why it was difficult.
We had hockey gloves that we had to wear, and moon boots, and this desert. It was the largest set in Europe. It was huge. It was a desert. They shipped in all of the sand. It was absolutely unbelievable. And here we are. We're supposed to trudge across it. Well, it was a heat wave. It was 115 degrees. Our suits had been lined with nylon, which makes you sweat anyway. We just wore sort of like little leotards underneath the whole thing, and then we'd get into this suit, and then off we'd go. Well, they had forgotten to put in any sort of escape for our breath. Well, if you're in there for any length of period of time, you start breathing carbon dioxide.
I do remember I almost passed out because a lot of that stuff was untried. They put it on you, and you just tried to see if it would work for you, and I really could not breathe.
We were passing out like flies. I mean, it was unbelievable. Poor John, by the time he'd get to the other end, they had to have a nurse there with an oxygen tank because he would sweat so profusely in there, he couldn't even see. It would just be one big, massive bowl of sweat.
I can remember John being very, very unhappy about, I think he found it pretty claustrophobic, shut up in the helmet.
So they'd have the nurse give him some oxygen and stuff like that, and all right, off we go again. They couldn't see a problem until it came to the distant shot where, to make the set even look bigger, they had kids. And two of the kids were Ridley's kids. And they both passed out in those little suits. So then, obviously, there must have been something that was going on, so they gave us air. That was nice of them.
I mean, Ridley pushes everybody. He tends to concentrate on all aspects of the frame. In other words, he's painting his picture. And so sometimes actors who are not used to this are used to the director sort of focusing on them and them only, whereas Ridley is concerned about, the look, about the dust, about the lighting, about the way things are dressed and things like that. I think they found sometimes that they were probably being a little bit neglected. And I remember Tom had some kind of angry words about having to hang around a long time on set.
The studio, of course, resisted a lot of what he was doing, resisted the time he was taking. I resisted some of the time he was taking. We had a full cast waiting for 3 days in one case.
Now, Tom, in your time.
I mean,
okay?
wait till I'm moving here.
Yes, I will. Okay, ready? And action. Ready, Tom? Turn back to me now. Ready?
And we all were getting pretty disgruntled. But it was all worth it. We all knew we were making a classic.
The first week, I had to I think, grab Jonesy, and I was wearing glycerin because it was supposed to be hot and we were supposed to be sweaty. And we did this shot, and my face started to get very red, and I felt this incredible burning. And I looked at the cat, and luckily they called lunch. I went upstairs. I was crying because I realized I was allergic to Jones. And I thought, gosh, it was probably so hard for Ridley to find 4 matching cats. They're going to get rid of me because I'm allergic to the cat. I was sure that it had been harder to find the cats than me, and maybe it was as hard, I don't know. But luckily, after I washed my face, it was the glycerin in cat hair that I was allergic to. But I remember thinking, I'm so out of here,
Everything was so claustrophobic on that set. I mean, that is one of those sets where you walked in, and there's the engine room. Well, that's fine. But connected to that is the corridor. Connected to that was the cafeteria. Connected to that was the hospital. It was all connected, the ship. So once you were on, you were on. You had to go through everything in order to get off.
So you could actually walk around the set and come out in different places and never leave it. And that's, in a way, how Ridley liked it and shot it.
And you couldn't see out, so you didn't know where you were. and it was almost like shooting on location, and that really did contribute to the claustrophobia and the realism. I know it really affected the actors because they, no matter where they looked, they saw Nostromo, you know, long halls and everything. They never, with practical lighting, you know, all inside.
Because I was mostly off-Broadway actor, to be in this set, there were these beautiful, majestic sets where you could roam freely and see the whole world of the film.
I think when you're dealing with confined space, that's one of the very much used aspects of the thriller as well. It's the very center of the pieces like We Clo and so on, you know? It's, there is no escape. That is one of the bases of the real tension of the film.
It was a low-key subject. There were very, very tight areas. Quite difficult to light in places, so unless you were going to swamp something with front light, then it was a bit complex, especially as so much of the movie was shot handheld with Ridley, although he did some form of blocking. It didn't mean to say it was particularly where he was going to end up. He also storyboards everything. He does small sketches, brilliant. You know, you get the light, the shade, the whole caboodle there. So it was his choice of lenses. It was his choice of where he was going with that particular camera. I suppose my effort was more in towards, I covered most of it with a second camera, tended to do the tighter shots when his camera wasn't in my shot.
Ridley was really subjective. He was operating the camera, so I don't think he could really pull back. We sensed right at the top that he wasn't able to pull back and be objective and come to us and talk to us about specifics. So being with an extraordinary group of actors allowed him to do what he was doing in terms of just composing this magnificent-looking film, looking through the camera.
He did something no director's ever done before or since. He had about 5 or 6 pages of each character. And this is the actor's work usually, but he had the whole background, how many missions I'd flown, my mother and father, my family, had my whole history written out on paper.
This is one of the things about Dallas's character, and for the other characters too, there was no history. It was hard to really, it was about the alien, let's face it. It wasn't about these character building, any one of these individuals. That was something we had to realize as we went along.
I think we ought to discuss the bonus situation.
Right.
Brett and I, we think we deserve full shares, right, baby?
Well, we were doing the breakfast scene, and it was very low energy, I remember, and I could tell that Ridley wasn't pleased, but he was again behind the camera, and as we walked away from the master with the group of all of us, Ridley suddenly turned to me and he grabbed my hand. He said, "Look, I don't want to give you your motivation to pick up your fucking teacup." And I went, and I burst into tears and I ran off. And he caught up with me and he said, "Oh, I'm so sorry. I'm really sorry." He said, "It's what I wanted to say to John, but I couldn't say it to him, so I said it to you." It was his second film and my first film, and he always said, you know, it was trial by fire for us.
Over the years, I've learned to communicate differently with actors on different subjects. Sometimes it's best to say nothing and let them evolve, right? And then instruct.
It was interesting. We'd find ourselves going off and having lunch together and going down to the pub and talking, and it actually became like these, you know, 7 people on the ship. It was kind of interesting, and you sort of developed your own little character from that.
Well, you know, I was from the theater, and I didn't realize that some actors really love to improvise, and Yaphet was certainly one of those. And Ridley, at that point, he was operating, and I'm not sure how comfortable he felt with our little group. And I remember that one of the scenes where there was a lot of improvisation was a scene which he used to film the rehearsals. So he never had rehearsals, and everyone just sort of went for it, which was actually a great learning experience. But that's, and it helps the film because I think we were on edge, and we were sort of, you know, into a survival mode. So I think it works very well. But at the time, it was hard for me because I came from such a different discipline where you are very faithful to the words of the writer.
Well, Yaphet's a big guy and quite formidable, and I think he tried to corner Ridley. There was a sort of a running joke where Ridley used to come up to us and say, which door is Yaphet standing by this morning, you know, so that he could go onto the set via another door where Yaphet wasn't there waiting to corner him.
Yaphet was always evolving, and in God bless him, driving me crazy, come to me with millions of ideas on a daily basis, saying, even to the extent of the day he would die, saying, you know, I'm not going to die today, I'm going to kill this son of a bitch, you know. And
I think there was genuine tension between, funnily enough, the tension that in the film between the below decks guys, between Yaphet and Harry Dean Stanton, was sort of reflected to a degree actually in reality, because I think Sigourney found it quite lonely, being the sort of, you know, the heroine amongst all these kind of tough guys, and it's certain parts of that atmosphere I think carried on a bit.
Would you get off my back, please?
I'll get off your back as soon as 12 modules fixed.
Sigourney had certain nervousnesses because Ridley wasn't inviting her at all to rushes, and it was an early movie for her, so she wasn't quite sure how she was coming over.
Sigourney was the new kid on the block, and they all felt that she wasn't really doing that good a job in the scenes with her. And they were grumbling among each other and felt that it might hurt the success of the film. And she and Yaphet especially would argue a lot in between scenes, but that manifested itself in the movie that was very convincing.
Anybody say nothing?
I'm thinking.
Oh, think fast.
Unless somebody can come up with a better idea, we're going to proceed with Dallas's plan.
She started out being very emotional and all of this stuff because of Dallas dying, and he just kept pushing her and pushing her. And then comes Yaphet, and he goes, all right, what are we supposed to do now? And then there's the scene, and then she says, I'm the captain of this ship. And he looked at her, and he goes, you've got to be kidding.
Listen, I'm not drawing any goddamn straws. I'm killing that thing right goddamn now, and I'm not waiting.
That's what I'm talking about, Parker, if you will listen.
Let's hear it. I'm listening. I want to hear the plan.
Well, the third time he comes on, he goes, you're the captain of this ship? I'm 250 pounds, black as can be. I have a fucking following, bitch. So if you're the captain of this ship, you better fucking tell me I am. Well, off he goes again. This time he comes on, and I'm sure that Ridley was egging her up because she had to be really, really strong. And so now this time he comes into the thing, and she goes, I'm the captain of this ship. And he says, okay.
Listen to me. If we break quarantine, we could all die.
Would you open the goddamn hatch? We have to get him inside. There was the scene in the hallway when she won't let us onto the ship after this whole trudging along with the bloodsucker on John's face, and we come in, and then she starts getting upset and saying, you know, we shouldn't be there, and then I slug her. Well, every time I went to hit her, she would duck the hit.
Right, what the fuck is going on?
Hey!
And so Ridley came over and he said to me, get her this time. So I thought, well, what am I supposed to do? I went like this, she ducked, and I came back and hit her that way. She went right into it. I didn't mean to hurt her. She literally went right into it.
What the fuck is going on?
Hey!
And she burst out crying, and that's what pissed her off, because she said that Ripley wouldn't cry. So she wasn't too happy about that, and she didn't feel that it was necessary to do that. But I guess Ridley felt that it was necessary to do that.
Ash was the real masterstroke, I think, in that he was completely... That was a one-off, wasn't it? That's the first time, you know, you have corporate paranoia, right? That in there you've got a suit on the ship. The difference is the suit is a robot, is a humanoid. So when Ash suddenly became peculiar, he goes peculiar on Sigourney. And he says I can explain everything when he's over her shoulder, and mother's womb. And she suddenly is spooked by him and realizes he's not what he seems to be. Then he goes strange and he has the sweat of milk here. And then he has to goes at it. And I always thought that was interesting, that do humanoids have sexual urges? You know, what would be nice is that this is the closest he ever gets to a sexual relationship. Then they come in and knock his head off. Then you go from Ash to a very small person underneath, running around with, if you watch it carefully, rather dodgy arms, okay? That's a dodgy moment. But it's taken up by the shock. The slack is taken up by the shock of, Jesus, a robot, then getting bashed and bashed. And then you've got Ian with his head stuck to the table, lying in a sea of milk and caviar and pasta and glass marbles. I thought the glass marbles were great. They're like memory, clear glass marbles. And poor Ian had to, every time I'd do a take, I'd give him, he hated milk as well. I'd give him a little bit of milk. So he'd ready? And then he'd start to talk. And then we then grizzled it up afterwards, gave it a little bit of effervescence on sound.
All other priorities rescinded.
And then incineration. Then it becomes really scary, because he says, that's a great speech. That speech came later, which I think Helen and Guyler had to write. We had to write that Ash is saying it's indestructible.
You have my sympathies.
Yeah, the head's like that, and then you cut in like. But I thought the head was very beautifully articulated, but I think something went wrong in the drying process. And I think, you know, they've changed the level and quality of latexes today, but in those days it shrunk, and he said it shrunk. I said, because you took a head cast, how could it not look like Ian? He said it shrank. I said, oh, God, you want to come back and redo it? No, we couldn't. So we had to get on with it. There was no coming back on that kind of budget. You got to keep going.
At the end of the first week of shooting, I asked to look at some dailies, and Gordon Carroll said, "You're not allowed to come to dailies." I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "Those are privileged." I said, "Gordon," I said, "surely if anyone has a right to look at dailies, it's me." On this picture, Gordon said, "Sue me." Right, Gordon did a much simpler thing than suing him. I went up in the projection booth.